Hi, I'm Peter Molan. I'm Professor in Biological Sciences at the University of Waikato in New Zealand. And it was here a bit over 30 years ago that we discovered that manuka honey has a very unusual type of antibacterial activity. Now, since then, we've done a lot of research on manuka honey, and it's become very famous, and it's in use around the world in registered medical products for treating infected wounds. But it's because of this special type of antibacterial activity that it's become famous. And in recent times, people have started selling manuka honey with another type of activity, which is just like in any other sort of honey. Now, I'm going to take you up to the lab to let you see why it matters which type of antibacterial activity you get. Manuka honey comes from bees collecting the nectar from manuka trees, which are native to New Zealand. When we started investigating the antibacterial activity of manuka honey, we found it was quite different from the activity in other sorts of honey. In other honeys, the antibacterial activity is due to hydrogen peroxide, a very well-known antiseptic. It's produced from an enzyme which the bees add to the nectar they collect. In manuka honey, it's not. So we distinguished the type of antibacterial activity in manuka honey with the name non-peroxide activity. The term non-peroxide activity is often abbreviated to NPA. When we tested a lot of samples of manuka honey, which beekeepers sent in for our research work, we found that not all of them had this special type of non-peroxide activity. So to distinguish the manuka honey samples which did have that non-peroxide activity, we used the term active manuka honey. Unfortunately, in more recent times, some people marketing manuka honey are selling manuka honey that doesn't have this special non-peroxide activity as active manuka honey. And this is confusing for consumers. I'll show you why it's important to have the right sort of antibacterial activity in the manuka honey that you buy. The original active manuka honey. If any of you have used hydrogen peroxide as an antiseptic on a cut, you'll be familiar with the way it fizzes when you put it on. That's because your blood and all the cells of your body have an enzyme that breaks down hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. It's the oxygen that gives the bubbles. Here's a demonstration of that. Now I'll put a drop of hydrogen peroxide on that blood, and you see how rapidly it fizzes up, how quickly the enzyme's breaking down the hydrogen peroxide. That means if you use any type of honey other than the original active manuka honey, you will have the enzyme in your body destroying the hydrogen peroxide activity. It's important to check which type of activity the marketer is referring to when they say active manuka honey. Some of them say on the label that it's non-peroxide activity or NPA. Some of them have that on their website. It's now known that non-peroxide activity, NPA, is due to a component of manuka honey known as methyl glyoxal. That's often abbreviated to MGO, and some honey will have the level of MGO in it put on the label. That shows you that it's the original active manuka honey. Others don't say what the activity is at all, or sometimes they'll use the term total activity, which is very misleading because it'll almost always actually be hydrogen peroxide activity that's referred to as total activity. I'll get our senior technical officer in the laboratory to do some tests on these honeys so you can see how they compare with each other. A 10-gram quantity of each honey is weighed out accurately. Ten milliliters of water is added to make a solution of honey. The solution is then further diluted so it can be measured onto the agar plates in which bacteria are grown. To some melted nutrient agar, a culture of Staphylococcus aureus bacteria is added, and the agar is then poured out into a plate to set. Holes are cut in the agar for the honey solution to be put in. The underside of the plate is then marked to identify which honey is put in each well. A 100 microliters of honey solution is measured into the well marked for that honey. The plates are then put in an incubator for the bacteria to grow. After the plate has been incubated overnight, the colonies of bacteria that have grown can be seen as white spots. You can see there's been no growth of bacteria around the holes containing the honey solution. The size of the clear zone, where there's no bacterial colonies, shows the strength of the antibacterial activity. The NPA 15+ and the MgO 550 honeys have about the same strength. The 25+ honey clearly has a much greater strength, as you would expect from its higher rating. Now I'll get the testing repeated, but this time with a small amount of blood added to the nutrient agar. The testing of the three honeys is done the same way as before. The solutions of the honeys are added to the plate exactly the same way as before, and the plate is incubated as before. The acidity of the honey has made the blood in the agar solidify, making the agar look a bit muddy, but you can still see quite clearly the zones where the colonies of bacteria have not grown. The size of the clear zones around the NPA 15+ honey and the MgO 550 honey are about the same as before. But look at the 25+ honey. There's no clear zone at all there, yet it gave the biggest clear zone by far when tested without blood present. The enzyme in the blood, which breaks down hydrogen peroxide, has removed the activity of the honey that was just rated as active manuka honey 25+, but it's had no effect on the non-peroxide activity or MgO, because the enzyme doesn't break down those. So if you are buying manuka honey to use as an antiseptic, make sure that the activity rated is said to be non-peroxide activity or MgO. If it just says active, the price may be lower, the activity may be higher, but it isn't going to be effective on an open wound. Saliva also contains an enzyme that breaks down hydrogen peroxide. So if you're using manuka honey orally, you again need to have the non-peroxide activity or MgO, otherwise you will lose a lot of the antibacterial activity. If you have friends who purchase manuka honey, Let them know about this video because it's important that they get the right type of activity.